What's up, Devy peoples? It's EK back with my co-pilot Kyle. Kyle, what is up?
Not much. Just chilling. Read a lot about the Big 12 this morning.
Yeah,
Probably
Kyle wrote us
spent
a novel.
spent way too long on the show sheet, so better be a darn good show.
Better be a good one. Well, we'll do our best to make it useful and fun as always. And yeah, we're getting into the nitty-gritty of the P5 conferences tonight with Big 12. It is unlikely we will get through all of it as Kyle has
The Big
written
14.
a Big 14. And Kyle has written at least a 14-page show sheet for you.
Hey, it
So
makes it easier. There will be less uhs and ahs, and it'll make it go faster, I think, hopefully.
you are the very paradigm of eloquence, my friend. No oohs and ahs from you. All right. What do you got first? You want to tell us about first, Kyle?
All right, let's start with what I think are going to be the bottom dwellers of this season. Albeit a team that's been good for a number of years recently, finally makes their move to P5, and the timing just does not work. And that is Cincinnati. They moved to the Big 12 finally, and Luke Fickell decides it's time to leave. So they don't get their first choice in head coach in Jeff Brom. He ends up back at Louisville. So they take the guy he's replacing at Louisville in Scott Satterfield. Scott Satterfield was formerly the App State head coach from 2013 to 2018, moved up to Louisville from 2019 to 2020 to 2022, and was pretty meh, I think is the best word for Louisville's recent performance. There were some bright spots for CFF. Malik Cunningham was really, really good in Scott Satterfield's offense, mostly due to his legs. He had a top 20 season in 2020, was QB2 in all of CFF in 2021, and then had an injury-riddled season last year. So,
and now he's a wide receiver for the Patriots.
Yeah. Satterfield will bring an interesting offense to Cincinnati, one that will probably use the run game pretty well. However, in his time at Louisville, he never really gave that run game share to one guy. That could be a talent thing. Those Louisville teams always had a few good backs and never really a great back. So that could be part of it. But I don't know. Usually a good run game in totality, usually split, though. Also, Scott Satterfield, fun fact for you, as a head coach, has never had a wide receiver with 70-plus receptions in a single season. So we're not really looking at wide receiver. What we're looking for is hopefully a running quarterback in this offense, maybe a running back. But this isn't an offense where you're going to get a ton of wide receiver production, which makes the rest of my work on this show sheet kind of stupid.
Kind of obviated, but you still brought 8 names to talk about.
And this team, lost a ton of talent 2 years ago when Desmond Ridder graduated with Alec Pierce and that running back from Alabama, Jerome Ford. And then they lost talent again last year with Trey Tucker graduating, Tyler Scott graduating, Nick Mardner graduating. And so the quarterback battle here comes down to Ben Bryant and Emory Jones. One used to start for Eastern Michigan, one started for Florida for a year, and then Emory Jones started the season last year as the starter at Arizona State, and then got injured and did not get the chance to come back in for Arizona State. Got outplayed by Trenton Bourguet. Emory has a career 33-18 touchdown interception ratio. He's pretty much the presumed starter. It seems like they've settled on Emory Jones. I don't think Satterfield has officially said that Ben Bryant is no longer in the competition, but Emory Jones seems to be the starter, which is never really a good sign for a college offense.
Yeah, my question is, how bad was Evan Prater? He's not even in the competition.
Evan Prater was so bad that they moved him to wide receiver.
Oh.
Yeah. Part of that is he had that shoulder injury, never really fully recovered, and they just decided, stop trying to throw the ball. You're going to catch it instead. And, he's got the athleticism to do it, but we'll get to that a little later. And then at the running back position, well, actually, back to quarterback real quick. They do bring in a 4-star freshman, Brady Drogish. I don't know, but he is athletic. He kind of fits that Satterfield system. I think he's probably the best answer on the roster. I think their 4-star / high 3-star from last year, Luther Richardson, transferred out. So I think it's just kind of Drogosh as the second or third option behind Emory Jones. I'd expect him to start near the end of the season. I think he's an interesting low P5 caliber quarterback for CFF, especially if he uses his legs at a high level. So I think that's worth bringing up here. And then the running back room is pretty gross. I mean, Charles McClelland was the UDFA after last season, so they return Corey Kiner as the running back who seems to be the one. He's the former LSU running back who transferred in before last season. Last season, he had 81 attempts, 362 yards, and 5 touchdowns. I think McClellan had somewhere near 150 attempts, so not that it really matters because it's a new head coach. So, but I think Kiner can take over the room. He might be a little interesting and probably like a backup type bye-week fill-in running back for CFF. Not really a Devy guy at this point at all. And then this wide receiver room graduates the 3 players mentioned before, Tyler Scott, Trey Tucker, and Nick Mardner. Doesn't return a single player with 5 or more receptions in 2022. So they bring in 6 transfers. The first of which is Donovan Ollie from Washington State. Ollie had some hype going into last season in the Washington State scheme. Was all right. He's had 43 receptions, 491 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That's like the second most production any of these transfers to Cincinnati have had last season. So I think Ollie will probably be a starter in the 3 wide sets, but I don't think that's necessarily something to be happy about. Xavier Henderson comes in from Florida. He had 38 receptions, 410 yards, and 2 touchdowns last year. Obviously, Florida's passing attack wasn't great, so that's pretty decent down in Florida. So he's a player who's likely to be an option. And then, obviously, Satterfield coming from Louisville brings a couple of Louisville guys with him. That's D. Wiggins, who's now in his 6th collegiate season. He had just 67 yards last year, but kind of broke out for Miami back in 2020. I mean, he's just interesting because he's so old. He could be CFF relevant, and like he has some experience in the system. And then also from Louisville is Braden Smith. He's also in his final year of eligibility. He's 5'10", 185. And according to PFF grade last year, he was the 2nd worst wide receiver in the entire ACC. So hopefully he's not on the field for Cincinnati next year, because that would mean bad things. And then 2 more players they recruited out of the portal are both slot guys. Both have good speed, and that's Connecticut's Aaron Turner and Auburn's Tavarish Dawson. Aaron Turner last year at Connecticut had 56 receptions, 530 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He's the one guy who I think is actually maybe semi-relevant in CFF this year.
5'7".
Yeah. The issue with him is there's 0 NFL upside at 5'7", 177. I mean, this is a guy who was recruited out of high school as a running back. So, I mean, he's got ability with the ball in his hands. He will be used in a bit of a Swiss Army knife fashion, I would guess. And then Tavarish Dawson is a guy at Auburn who's had spring hype basically every year he's been there, but never translated it to the field. I mean, he does have elite track speed, but that's pretty much all he's got. He's also tiny. And then I think the 2 wide receivers who are like most interesting to me, like if one of these guys actually broke out, I think it might be good, is first of all, Evan Prater, the former quarterback. I mean, Satterfield has been pretty given him some decent praise and his changed wide receiver. I mean, he's no longer in quarterback meetings at all. He's like purely playing wide receiver. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. He seems excited about it and everything. And he's getting hype around the program. It sounds like he might be a starter, at least in some way. They want to get the ball in his hands. They think he might be the most athletic player on the team, on offense. So, I mean, Prater could be interesting. I don't know if like the hands are there. Obviously, that tends to be the issue with quarterback turned wide receiver, but we'll see.
It's worked out for Isaiah Williams, but he's the only one I can think of that's really
Terrell Pryor.
Terrell Pryor. Yeah. He didn't get converted in college. He got converted in the NFL, right?
Yeah. And then their true freshman wide receiver, actually a 3-star, Barry Jackson. He was the best wide receiver in the spring game. Satterfield called him the most improved player of all 15 spring practices. I think he's a guy who will likely shed the year 1-0 tag, if not, be a legit producer as a freshman. So he's really the guy I kind of want to target now in, C2C, CFF Dynasty. Maybe he takes off year 1 and he has some value going into next year.
I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but Satterfield's had slot receivers be really good, right? Like
Tutu Atwell, and that's about
and
it.
there was someone, I thought there was someone else right after that was decent, but I don't remember. Tutu's the only NFL guy I can think of.
Yeah. And then at tight end, I think the tight end spot might be interesting. I mean, Shimon Medier is going into his second season at Cincinnati. He was a low rated recruit, but got a lot of hype from our community as a guy who's a freak athlete, really big, 6'5", 248. I mean, last year Josh Wiley was good at Cincinnati. Not that matters because it's a new head coaching staff, but I mean. And Satterfield used Marshawn Ford decently well at Louisville. I mean, he had a season where he was a top 10 tight end. So I think the tight end spot is one to watch out for. I think the battle is between that sophomore Shimon Medier and redshirt junior Peyton Singletary. Obviously, Singletary has 2 years on Medier, which could be the deciding factor. But I think Medier definitely has a higher ceiling. And if he does end up starting this year, I think there could be pro potential for Medier.
Yeah, I took Medier late in a couple supplementals where I was weak at the position. I mean, if he doesn't win the job, you can drop him pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
If he wins the job, you might have an actual Devy tight end. So that's pretty easy. So are you drafting any of these guys wide receiver in any format, or are you just watch listing them?
I think Barry Jackson might be worth a 45th round pick.
Yeah.
Late. Especially in a league where you can drop him.
Yeah, exactly.
But
yeah, no, I mean, I love true freshmen standing out, right? That's exciting always. So we're gonna flip over to the other side of the country, hit up on BYU. And we started briefly to talk about BYU before we realized that we're big dum-dums and we've actually transferred to the Big 12 / the Big 14. And,
do you want to just use the same sheet as last week?
I copied my sheet over. Did we actually talk about them?
No, the ranking sheet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I shared it. I didn't share it with you because I was going to use the same one to change the title on it. So, I did no work on your guys as you were talking about them, but do we care about any of them? Mateer. I care about Mateer.
Drogosh. I think Drogosh for Devy.
For Devy.
Near the end.
Yeah,
down here, like below Frank Harris.
Yeah. Yep. That sounds right. And and Barry Jackson, I think, should go on there somewhere. I mean, if he does break out as a freshman, then that's interesting. And no, he's a P5 guy, but I don't think I care. Oh, Kiner a little bit for CFF, but
yeah,
pretty far down there.
I don't think Emory Jones is horrible for CFF. I think he might be all right.
You see these guys get better in their third year, in their fourth year, that have been
in their sixth year.
4 years. Yeah, is it his sixth year?
I think so. I think when he started at Florida, it was his third year, and then last year would have been his fourth, so his fifth.
Yeah, I mean, he's athletic, right? And that's, Satterfield is going to have a dual threat. So
I'll put him down here with Ari Patu and Grant Wilson.
Yeah. All right. So I will talk BYU while you do that. BYU, always a productive system under this coaching staff. No noteworthy changes. We don't really have to get in the weeds on that at all. Obviously, last year, Puka Nakua was the guy to have there. But there's been productive wide receivers coming out of that offense. There's been very productive quarterbacks every year coming out of that offense. I mean, Zach Wilson last year, Jaron Hall was excellent. Both ran a little bit, both flung the ball around the field. And then it's been a couple years, but Algier was excellent at running back there last year. They didn't really have that guy, but we think they might have one this year. So, quarterback Keaton Slovis, depending on how you feel about him, might be useful. I am not a big fan. Kyle is shaking his head. He is not a big fan, but I do think that it's a better system. I think he's got a little bit of talent around him. I don't know. See what happens, right? I think it's probably the best system for him that he's been in since USC, but wasn't great at USC. So, after his first year where he was, good for a freshman. So I'm passing on Slovis. I'm probably not dropping him if I have him. I'm waiting to see what happens, but I'm not seeking him out either. The wide receivers are the guys that I've been targeting in drafts, and depending on the draft, you can get these guys the last round. They go undrafted sometimes. Chase Roberts had a little bit of hype, I think, largely on the back of Volume Pig's article earlier this offseason when Cody Epps had briefly transferred and then transferred back. Roberts was in his second year last year. He was a redshirt freshman and had like one or two dynamite games and then vanished for the rest of the year. The other guy worth talking about there, there's two guys really worth talking about there, but one talks about the third one. So the other guy that I've been targeting is Cody Epps, who's I think a third-year player there, and he was really good last year. I want to say I'm trying to pull up. I can't pull it up by the team here. I was trying to pull up BYU's other useful guy. So Cody Epps was like a 15-point per game player last year, and then the third wide receiver is actually a returner. Sorry, give me a second. I'm getting him open now, and he is Cody Epps. Keanu Hill was actually the most productive returner. For some reason, I have not seen him get drafted in any league ever. He's not owned in any league I'm in. And yet he is maybe the Puka replacement. I mean, he's 6'4", 210. So don't ask me why no one is paying attention to this kid, but I would give him just as good odds as the other two to be the guy there. I mean, why not? I think he's a super senior, so maybe that's why people are favoring the slightly younger guys. But I think one of them is going to be useful, and the other two are going to be like 600-yard guys. They're going to spread it out a little bit. Tight end Isaac Rex was kind of getting some Devy hype 2 years ago for 430 yards in his first season as the starter. Last
with
year,
Zach Wilson.
With Zach Wilson, right? It was like Zach's dude. Last year was in like a complete messy committee, but his competitor for those targets has moved on. That would have been Dallin Hoker, who's now a Buffalo, if I recall correctly.
Colorado State.
Yeah, Colorado State. In any instance, we're hopeful that Rex can return to his, redshirt freshman form. I don't think he has any competition for the snaps, at least from me poking around on beats. We'll see how that goes. And then at running back, we think Aiden Robbins, who is a transfer in for ULNB, where he went for over 1,000 yards and 9 tutties last year. We think he's the guy, and we think it's a guy you want. He's an upperclassman, so you're not really, targeting him hard in CFF Dynasty, but he is worth a late round draft pick in your supplementals. In CFF, he's worth a pretty substantial pick. So that's what I got in BYU. You got anything else there, Kyle? I didn't touch on.
No, I don't think so. I mean, LJ Martin, the freshman running back, I think he's pretty interesting in the long term. But I think that's the only freshman that comes to mind is LJ.
LJ Martin, freshman, BYU running back. Check him out. I've never seen him get drafted in the supplementals, so it's probably more of a watch list guy.
I mean, sometimes Blake Hampton likes him, like draft-wise likes him. Here he is. He's 6'1", 205. Clocked at 20.5 miles per hour. Rushed for, oh my gosh. His junior year, he rushed for 2,737 yards and 29 touchdowns in Texas 5A football.
Okay. That's some yardage. Yeah, and 5'8" too. I mean, that's the big boys. So
senior year, 2,137 yards and 23 touchdowns. Won the district championship. I think he's seems like more of a pounder, kind of the guy that BYU tends to lean on throughout a season.
Like
so,
they're not looking for running backs to catch passes. They want them to smash it up the gut, right? So,
could be the next.
Algier was a big play guy because he broke tackles, right? That's his whole thing.
Could be the next Algier.
Could be the next Algier. You heard it here first, or maybe second. All right, what do you got?
You want to hit share on that screen in StreamYard?
Oh, yeah. So this is our big board that we usually share with you guys. Kyle is tippity-tapping.
You like where I have these guys? You think any of these wide receivers belong on our Devy list or anything?
I'm generally no, not right now. Aiden Robbins looks good to me. I mean, for CFF that makes sense. LJ Martin looks good there. And yeah, I mean, I'm drafting Epps over Keanu Hill, but like I said, I don't really have a reason for it. He's just got the hype. He's 15 point per game guy, a little bit more hype, but I mean, you read the beats and they talk about Keanu Hill and then the other two wide receivers. So, I mean, I could argue putting these guys in a bunch right in the middle and calling it good, but I don't really have any reason to.
It's interesting.
I think Roberts is maybe a little bigger and more athletic, but I'm cool with them where they are. What about Rex? Where do you put Rex?
Oh, jeez, I didn't know if I moved.
Rex should have some
up here on CFF.
Yeah,
hitting last.
I mean, freshman breakout, right? Redshirt freshman breakout. It's worth something in Devy, but
I like Keon Burnett though. I don't know.
I don't think people are really drafting him in Devy right now. So it's more like you maybe throw him on the end of the roster and see in C2C and hope for the best.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. TCU.
I'm just trying to fix this. TCU, second place last year. Played in the national championship, got blown out, but I mean, they played in the national championship. They won a playoff game, and they lost everybody. And that starts at offensive coordinator. Garrett Riley moves on to Clemson. Should be a huge upgrade for Clemson, but TCU has to replace him, and they replace him with Kendall Briles. I think the controversy around that hire is completely fair, but that's not really what we're here to talk about. Briles runs a very good system, always has since Baylor. Ran it at Arkansas last year and a couple of years before that. Did well with Treylon Burks, Raheem Sanders. He used to be at I don't remember, but we're going to see some kind of mind meld of Kendall Briles and Sonny Dykes. And both of those guys have had very, very successful offenses at the collegiate level. So I think passing wise they'll be productive, rushing wise they'll be productive, receiving wise they'll probably have somebody. I mean, Sonny Dykes has coached guys like Zach Evans, Kendra Miller. So um, yeah, the one thing here to watch out for between these two is that Bryles' offenses tend to lead to slot wide receiver targets, while Sonny Dykes seems to like the outside boundary wide receivers. So I think that's something to watch. Not really sure like how that's going to work out for TCU going into this year. So that's where I'm looking. And then in terms of the talent on the roster, they lose Max Dugan to the NFL. They lose Kendra Miller and Amari DeMarcado to the NFL. And then wide receiver, they lose Quentin Johnson and Darius Davis to the NFL. Tay Barber also graduates. That's all three of their leading wide receivers, their two leading running backs, and their starting quarterback. They also lose four-star freshman wide receiver Jordan Hudson as he transfers out and goes to SMU. Hudson wasn't a huge factor last year, but I don't think he was quite a year 1-0. So that's also a big loss. The backup quarterback from last year and the year before that is Chandler Morris, who transferred in from Oklahoma. Actually won the job, I think, in 2020 before getting replaced by Max Dugan. So he'll come back and be the starter once again. That's pretty much set in stone. So Chandler Morris expected to lead this offense. And then, of course, when players leave, you got to bring new players in. TCU went hard in the portal, as they probably should have. They bring in at running back Trey Sanders from Alabama. He's an older guy, obviously has Alabama recruiting pedigree, so he's not a nothing burger in any sense. He was a standout in the spring game. He scored 2 touchdowns, including one through the air and one on the ground. Of course, they have a returning running back, Amani Bailey, who went out of the spring game with a concussion, which partly led to that. And then at wide receiver, they bring in 3 guys. JoJo Earl, also coming in from Alabama. He was a guy who a lot of people were excited about for Devy when he came in as a freshman. I mean, this is a dude who's super fast. Just never really got going for Alabama, had some injury issues, couldn't really find a role that he fit. Jack Beck comes in from LSU. He's a guy who started out as a tight end, switched to wide receiver. I think still maintains tight end eligibility on Fantrax, which is kind of the big thing, because if he continues to do that and plays significant snaps, then he'll be CFF relevant at tight end. It's not that hard to be. And then John Paul Richardson comes in from Oklahoma State. He seems to be the one who had the most hype out of those 3 in the spring. He was a spring game MVP. Last season at Oklahoma State, he had 49 receptions, 503 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Sonny Dykes said, he filled a need for us. We lost 2 really good inside receivers with Tay Barber and Darius Davis, and I expect JP Richardson to come in and carry the load inside. He's roommates with Chandler Morris. Anytime you're roommates with the quarterback, you're going to catch a lot of balls, quote unquote, Sonny Dykes. So I think JP Richardson is a guy that we need to look at in CFF. I think he might be the most productive wide receiver in this offense, especially in a Bryles system that tends to like the slot receiver.
Yeah, I've been drafting him. Literally nobody else has. I drafted him in all my first ones and was like, am I like missing something? But every TCU camp reporter was just like, this is going to be the wide receiver 1 for this offense. All of them, So, gosh, I don't. What do you do with him in CFF though?
Hell, I'd be drafting him if I did this research before my drafts.
Yeah, I may read some camp reports. So particularly when I know people got moved on the superstar, right?
Yeah.
But what do you do with him? I mean, Jimmy Horn or JPR? I mean,
in CFF,
yeah,
Richardson.
Yeah, Mario Williams, Dante Wright, Corey Rucker, or JPR.
I'd rather have Rucker. I'd rather have Dante Wright from a 1-year lens.
Yeah. And John Paul Richardson, I mean, if he blows up this year, he could be a Devy guy. Probably not like a high round one just because he's like a little slot guy. but I could see him, getting day 3 capital, right? It's not a far cry.
Yeah. And then there's still some players, position players on this TCU offense that are just coming back from last year and weren't necessarily stars last year. One of those is wide receiver DJ Allen. He was a high 4-star in the last recruiting cycle, the wide receiver 28 per 24/7 in last year's class. He was redshirted last year due to injury, so a year 1-0, but one with a story that definitely lends itself to maybe not matter as much, considering he's coming off an injury. He's 5'11", 195, has pretty good speed. Some athletic comparisons, according to CampusToCanton.com, are Antonio Williams, Tavion Robinson, and Reggie Roberson. Those guys are all right. DJ Allen, high pedigree, could fill the role.
Could fill the slot role or off-ball flanker. I mean,
he's 5'11". He's not tiny, but he's not big. I don't know.
You haven't heard a lot about him from the program.
Yeah,
where he's
yeah, that's true.
At this point, freshman year, sure, injury. Spring, you're still not hearing anything. Did he get injured late? Do you remember? I don't remember.
No, I think he just missed the entire season. Just like an ankle or something.
Concerning. I mean, I think I think if he does something this year, then you put attention to him. But I guarantee you, he's still on rosters too. And I'm not trying to trade for him. You know what I mean?
No.
If he was free in the 15th round of a supplemental, sure, but I'd probably rather take a CFF guy at that
He's
point.
one of those guys that I wouldn't have dropped at the beginning of supplementals, but if I had one right now, I'd drop him.
Yeah. And then the other guys there too. Did I interrupt you? But Savion Williams.
Savion Williams,
yeah.
The senior, I believe, fourth year wide receiver next year. He was 4th on the team last year in receptions with 27. He's 6'5". I mean, that's probably the X wide receiver. Just because everybody else who's interesting is small. I mean, Jack Beck's big too, but Jack Beck or Savion Williams, I mean,
Beck's got a true freshman. You know what I mean?
At LSU.
3 years at LSU, right? So,
but he hasn't gotten a single nugget of hype.
Here's my problem. Here's my problem with Beck there, because I've been thinking about this in the offseason, right? I liked TSU as an opportunity for Devy and CFF this year. Beck's the slot guy. JoJo is a slot guy. John Paul Richardson, probably a slot guy, right? So I'm if John Paul Richardson's good, what are they going to play JoJo at flanker? You know what I mean? And then how does Beck get on the field? Because Savion, he doesn't have the releases or the route running savvy to be, winning it at.
Unless they move him back to tight end.
They could, call him a second big slot and roll out 2 big slots and 4 wide. It's just you got to tell a story to get Jack Beck on the field. So
yeah,
that's concerning to me, Savion Williams, I'm interested in him, though. I mean, he's returning. He's the veteran. This team obviously got gutted, right?
Yeah. And, I mean, Darius Davis wasn't necessarily, bad for CFF. He wasn't great, but I think he was, a 13, 14 points per game type guy. As a wide receiver 2 last year.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think you could be Savion Williams is going to get Quentin Johnston's production, right?
No.
Johnston is a very different animal. But does the offense flow through the X? I could see that.
Does the offense just sputter completely?
Yeah. I mean,
I think I have an issue with and I have an issue with that idea just because of how good these 2 play callers are.
Yeah. I think Trey Sanders is going to run it up the gut a million times. I think what's the kid, DiMaccardo? Yeah.
No, Monty Bailey.
Yeah, Monty Bailey, I think, is also going to be good. I think you're going to see a run-first offense with shots. That's kind of what they do, right? That's kind of what Sonny Dykes does. And who gets the shots, So anyway,
Earl.
how does Earl get on the field? I mean, if he's not playing ahead of
Richardson, shots. He's so fast.
Yeah, I mean, he would be the flanker then, So I think it's murky. I think someone's going to be good here. I think you got to listen to the camp and say, even though he doesn't fit the prototype of guys we've seen in the
JPR.
past, it's probably Richardson. But I mean, I've drafted Savion Williams shares. I'm looking at him in like the last rounds, the drafts I'm in now. There's one that's only P5, and I'm like, I'll take more guys like him there because it's just a shallower pool, but got no Devy value.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. Do you want to rank any of these other guys for CFF?
A wide receiver.
I feel like you kind
I
of
think.
got to, but like I don't know what
I
to do
think
with that.
JPR, Williams, and Earl are the only three.
Yeah, and I think Savion Williams is probably the next guy. I would guess. What? That's like a gut thing. That's a
Yeah,
five.
I like Richardson the most for CFF.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, where does Savion go? Cody Epps range. I mean, I'm gonna put him in Cody Epps range.
Yeah, I mean Polk's the wide receiver 3 on his team. There's only like so much you can do.
Yeah, unless someone gets hurt. And then JoJo. I mean, and honestly, it's like if JoJo doesn't get on the field and dominate this year, he doesn't have any Devy value anymore either to me. He's got to get on the field and seize a role and produce this year.
No, I agree with that, but I think if he does, the Devy value is still high just because he is so freaking fast.
Sure, yeah, and has performed when given opportunities. He just hasn't had a lot of opportunities, and obviously didn't think he was getting opportunities this year. He got Kobe Prenticed, I think, is what happened. So where do you buy? He's CFF. He's super low, right? Or is it even worth?
Yeah, I'd rather have Howell. I'd rather have Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like down there, Jalon Lane.
I think I'd rather have him than Lemon and CFF for just this year.
Yeah, because I don't think Lemon is necessarily going to see a high snap share. So, and it's the thing is, it's like you're weighing upside versus.
Yeah, I mean the upside's insane.
Right, the upside.
The upside's like Jalen Hyatt.
Yeah, the upside's he's the wide receiver 1, and he's dominant. You know what I mean? Brendan Rice, Odio Hilaire, Jordan Tyson. Where do you put him for CFF? I mean, Jeremy Bernard range. Jeremy Bernard's done for Devy. Yeah, I mean, Jeremy Bernard's done more.
Yeah, I think there's good. And then one last big player I do want to talk about for what team are we talking about? TCU is the running back Imani Bailey, transferred in from University of Louisiana last year. Was really good at Louisiana, had 102 carries, 642 yards, and 8 touchdowns as a redshirt freshman, along with 15 receptions for 153 yards. Last year, he had 31 carries for 250 yards and 2 touchdowns as the RB3. I mean, home run hitter right there, 8.1 yards per carry. I mean, only 30 carries, but he was efficient. I think there's a battle between him and Sanders for sure, but I think it's a 1A, 1B. Kind of a Sanders, thunder to Imani Bailey's lightning. I think Imani Bailey is a legitimately good running back. So Imani Bailey is a guy that I have on a lot of rosters, and he wasn't a guy that I was cutting.
Yeah, I think he's in that category. I'm not cutting him, but I'm probably not drafting him.
I think I would draft him late.
Hey, we're taking a show up, but every draft I've seen, someone's taken Sanders, no one's taken Bailey. Bailey might have been owned already in some of them, but I bet if I look at my league list, he's probably unrostered in at least 50% of my leagues. But you're right. He could just as easily be he's the 1A, right? If Sanders doesn't pop. But Sanders popped in the spring game. Sanders fits the mold of what they've done recently with running back there, right? IKA, he's a Kendry Miller analog. He's a bruiser. He can catch passes. I mean, just in Devy potential, Sanders has some. Bailey has none. But yeah, I mean, for CFF, yeah, it could be Bailey, sure.
Sure. And then at tight end, Jared Wiley finished last season fifth on the team in receptions, had 245 yards and 4 touchdowns. This dude is 6'7" and has some speed, enough to stretch the seams, stretch the middle of the field. I like him as a legit red zone option at 6'7". 4 touchdowns last year. I think there's a chance that he takes another step and he's second or third best tight end in this conference, especially on a team that's lacking for weapons. So I think Jared Wiley is definitely a watch list name at tight end. I think a lot of people are, but he's definitely one that I would have up there.
For CFF or for Devy?
For CFF.
Like Isaac Rex? You'd rather have Mazzotti? I'd rather have Mazzotti.
I'd rather have Mazzotti. I'd rather have Jordan Smith. I think both those guys have proven
Aaron
more.
McLaughlin's pretty good for CFF too.
Yeah, I think him and Wiley had similar seasons last year, though, and I think it's easier to say, oh, TCU lost everybody. Wiley could take a step.
Sure. I'll buy that. Plus, McLaughlin has the kid I like barking in his heels, right?
Keon Burnett.
Yeah, Burnett.
And then TCU, I think they're building a program. I think Sonny Dykes is doing it. They're recruiting at a high level. They bring in running back Cameron Cook, who is a 4-star on 24/7, the running back 19 in the class. He was a high school track star. In football, he played running back, but he lined up in the slot occasionally. He had an incredibly productive high school career, had 1,589 rushing yards as a senior. He's super elusive in the open field. I think Cameron Cook is I'd have him higher than RB19 in the class for freshmen personally.
For Devy, Frank Gore or Cameron Cook?
Frank Gore. Jordan James too. Alton McCoskell too.
Dante Dowdle. We don't know
above Dowdle.
Yeah, he's just bigger. So yeah, I've drafted Cook a few times. I've drafted Dowdle once.
Yeah,
I just think Cook.
That seems to be the consensus.
Yeah, the profile of the pass catcher is more interesting to me than the profile of Bruiser at Oregon sitting behind two guys that are good.
And then they also bring in a wide receiver, Cordell Russell, who is a 4-star on 24/7, the wide receiver 12 per 24/7. I think we as a Campus to Canton community, a Devy community, whatever you want to call it, I think most of us are all higher on Cordell Russell than the wide receiver 12 in the class. I see him pretty firmly ranked as the wide receiver 6, wide receiver 7, wide receiver 8. Firmly a tier 2 guy, I think, for most people in our community. He's 6'2", 205 pounds. He was clocked at 22.5 miles per hour. That's freakish. That's Quentin Johnston, right? And then he went to the Under Armour All-American game, won player of the day during one of the practices, had some serious hype there. And he early enrolled and was there this spring. Didn't get a ton of hype. I'm not even sure he played in the spring game, but just being there, I'm sure, helped him as a freshman. So Cordell Russell is a guy that I like.
Yeah, I like him as well. I think I'm kind of like near at the top of that next tier after the guys that I really like, right? The guys that could do something, but I also won't be surprised if they don't, just because it's college, right? Like, you never know.
Yeah.
It happens every year. But yeah, just the athleticism, the opportunity at TCU, the fact that we've seen TCU develop some guys and get them to the next level under this regime specifically, help guys flourish. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. But where are you ranking him? I like Jordan Tyson had 3 back-to-back 100-yard games at the end of last year. Are you taking a second-tier freshman over him?
I think
one behind him I can make an argument for, but Cowling,
that's for sure.
are you taking a little? I think Cowling.
I think Cowling's like the safe pick. Cowling's, this guy is a 3rd, 4th round NFL pick, right?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe the 5th, but he's getting drafted, and he's probably going to be successful in the NFL to some level.
Yeah.
He's going to get on the field.
But Russell, if he hits, he's a top 15 NFL draft pick, period.
He has the potential
But
to
like,
hit at the top
yeah,
15 level, right?
but
Whereas
yeah,
like
we're so
you
sure
can't
about
tell that
Cowing
story
though.
if you're Cowing. Even McMillan like has no chance to be a top 15 pick, right? Like none. It's
Yeah,
taken 4 years to get where he is. I think he has the potential to be a day two pick, but I don't think you can make an argument for him to be higher than like 20 or like 25, and that would take him like probably would take Odunze getting banged up and McMillan
and
going for like 1,500 yards, right?
I think like these are the questions where like it's all about how you want to strategize your
Right.
team, your league. I mean, if you want to swing for the fences, then draft Cordell Russell. Like that works. Like if you hit on those fence swings, you have the best team in the league.
Yeah. I mean, it's a Devy versus C2C thing, too, because it's tough
Mm-hmm.
to take Russell over Cowing and C2C because Cowing is going to give you like 1,100 yards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he's going to this year help you win money on the CFF side. So that's, yeah, tough to take the freshman over him in this format. But yeah, I mean,
I
obviously,
yeah,
what do you
I
think?
like most of your other rankings. I think Chandler Morris should be on the bottom of the CFF list, but
Yeah,
I think
throw him in
Trey
there.
Sanders is way too high on the Devy
And
side.
CFF on the Devy
On the,
side.
I don't think Trey Sanders gets more than seventh round, sixth round capital.
I can tell a story
Like
where he
I think
goes
he's
for like
Jerome Ford
1,200
at
yards this
best.
year. Yeah, that's fair. But who'd I put him ahead of? Austin Jones?
I mean,
He's
Tevin
been
White's a former 5-star, right?
4-star.
Austin
Yep,
Jones.
he's
Austin
a
Jones was
4-star.
like the best running back in the country when he was healthy last year.
He got
I'd rather have
drafted ahead by
Bangura.
Travis Dye, who was a day three
I'd
pick.
rather have Bangura. I think I'd rather have Ali.
All right. We can put Sanders in the middle of that pack. How about that?
I'd rather have Sanders than Carson Steele,
I'm
but
not.
I'd rather have Bangura. I think
All right. We'll put him there.
Bangura is interesting. We'll
Yeah,
put
Bangura's
Chandler
interesting.
Morris, I think, above.
Yeah, you can put
Think
Chandler Morris
there?
wherever you want. Uh, between
Yeah.
Hennigan and Dante Moore. Yeah, I drafted Chandler Morris in the one league that he was available in. I think you get the potential to get a couple of years out of him. He's probably not a Devy guy, but it's Sonny Dykes. Like the quarterbacks produce there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Morris. He's not athletic
No,
in the way. What's his
but
face was?
even like
But
Dugan was, yeah.
yeah, I mean Dugan was an elite athlete. Like the kid ran like a 4.6 or 4.58 at a quarterback. Like that's bonkers. All right, so we'll talk about my one fun team here. Kyle delegated me.
Don't tell me I screwed you
He gave
over.
me all the bunk teams in the Big
I got
12.
excited, okay?
You did.
I started working and I was like, oh, I want to write about Houston. Oh, I want to write about
I want all the
Kansas.
marbles. Eric gets Baylor. Kansas.
You got Texas.
Hey. Yeah, I got Texas. It was like you threw me a bone. All right, Texas, great. If you're watching the show, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably already know all the players we care about on Texas, right? Because you're probably like us, and you are like heavily invested in college football, Devy, and dynasty. But Texas is rife with dynasty talent, right? Quinn Ewers was the QB1 in his class last year. Was the highest rated
I thought we were talking
quarterback.
about Baylor.
I know. We're talking about Texas. Baylor's awful. Give me my moment in the sun here of like.
Quinn Ewers is tied for the highest rated recruit ever on 24/7. They have a 0 to 1 scale, and he was a 1 period. So
right.
You can't get higher than that. So tied for
and those
first.
Guys historically have not missed much at all.
Yeah,
right?
it's like Vince Young, I think. Trevor Lawrence, maybe. Trevor Lawrence was a 1 at one point and then got moved down.
Yeah, 9.9. Even like the QB1.
Justin Fields was a 9.9.
Yeah,
I think.
So even like the QB1 in a given class, right, tends to succeed. We've seen some guys like who's the Oklahoma kid, Rattler, right? Obviously hasn't panned out yet on a Devy asset level.
Don't say yet. He's not gonna.
I mean, he could go off, I guess, but yeah, right. So I'm saying usually a pretty safe bet, and yet he managed to vastly underwhelm last year, being okay, except in one game where he was really good. And yet, I think you also got to look at it from both sides. I don't like making excuses for guys, but he was really a freshman. He was the age of a freshman, despite having a year as an early commit in riding the bench at Ohio State, right?
Yes.
He is really just a freshman last year and played fine as a freshman. Now, you need him to be good this year, or he's dead, right? But
He still wasn't like DJU bad last year.
he
So
wasn't he wasn't bad. He just wasn't great, right? He was
yeah,
like average college quarterback, but the problem is the expectations were for him to excel. And now he's got Arch Manning nipping at his heels. I liked a lot of the chatter I heard about Ewers early in the offseason. He cut his hair. He got serious. He made the outward signs of getting serious and trying to be more of a team guy and things like that. So who knows? Again, I'm not like trading for Quinn Ewers, although if you do believe he is, a round one NFL talent, he can be had at a discount at this point. And I think it's still probably more likely than not that he's a first round NFL quarterback. So I think there's some value to be mined there if you're the risk taking sort and you just want to get a value. Like you could probably trade any first round freshman pick right now to get Quinn Ewers, right? Like Jonte Cook. You don't think so? I bet
no,
Nico Iamaleava gets you Quinn Ewers in 6 out of 7 weeks.
no, I don't think so. I mean,
Arch
like
Manning
the
gets
campus
him,
to Canton guys still have Quinn Ewers ranked as like QB4, QB5. I still have him ranked as QB5. I
yeah,
think the only two freshmen that get you Quinn are Moore and Nelson.
right. And I'm not trading either of them for Ewers right now. Would you?
No. Well,
Uh,
I'd consider it with no. No, I
I like
wouldn't.
both of them
No, I
quite a
wouldn't.
lot. I like both of them quite a lot. And I'm not. I'll reboot. You know what I mean on that. But whatever. We're not going to be surprised if Quinn Ewers like goes nuclear this year either. Like I don't think we'll be surprised either way. There's a really wide range of outcomes. I think certainly a lot of those outcomes involve him being good for CFF, being a good draft pick, so on and so forth. Obviously, Arch Manning now there nipping at his proverbial heels. Arch Manning ranked as high as the QB1 in this class. I have him more in line with where the C2C guys have him. I'm taking him. Honestly, I kind of like Jackson Arnold better than Manning and
I'm with you.
Nico. I mean, I get why people take Nico because like
I like Nico
a
more, but
typo,
yeah.
right? He's going to throw for a bazillion yards, but I think Jackson Arnold is the best value in Kansas Canton supplementals right now. Because you're getting him at the turn or the 201. Like I like Jonte Cook a lot, so I've taken Cook ahead of him, but I might regret that in a couple of years when Jackson Arnold is like a first round quarterback. But I don't know. I think Jonte Cook's going to be around one wide receiver too. So we'll see. We'll find out. And then of course Malik Murphy is still there, has played well, hyper athlete. Does he follow in the footsteps of Rashawn Johnson and become a running back? Does he transfer out? Be interesting to see what happens. I think that there's very little chance of him starting at Texas, barring an injury to Quinn Ewers this year, right? There's no way Arch Manning is sitting for a second year. He's just not. And you're not letting Manning walk out the door. So Malik Murphy is probably gone next year, right? Unless he's just like a team guy, unless he's a backup. I can't imagine.
He'll be fun when he moves down.
Oh gosh, yeah, he's like Hornsby. People are drooling over Hornsby this year down at the G5 level. Murphy's better than Hornsby.
Yeah,
Too.
for sure.
So yeah, I mean, so he's an interesting guy if you can get him for free, I think. But I think that's what you're hoping for, right? You're hoping that he moves down and just destroys at the G5 level. Or heck, man, he could move down to like Nebraska.
Pac-12,
yeah, yeah, exactly. Pac-12 and go that route and be really, really good too. So running back, obviously the hype is around Cedric Baxter, the spiritual successor to Bijan Robinson. I don't know if he's a Bijan level talent, but he is certainly the RB1 in this class. Very few people have any argument for anyone else in that. I don't. I think Baxter's good. I think he's going to a system that we've seen running backs succeed at an extraordinary level. Right? And he's an all-around back, 3-down guy. So I think he's the future there. But I think the present is Jonathan Brooks, who has been good in all of the action that he's seen, and who everything on the team and beats tell us is that he's the guy, at least to start the season. Sure. Could he get nicked up and lose the job to Baxter? Sure. I think it's more likely that we see like what it was in Bijan's freshman season, where Bijan increased in work over the season. Took more and more work away from Keontae Ingram and from Rashawn Johnson. I think that's what happens. And then, does Jonathan transfer out after that? Yeah, probably. And probably, again, like a guy that goes on elsewhere and is really good. And then I think the wild card here is Jadon Blue. I still think Jadon Blue is really good.
He's small.
He's smaller than we all thought, right? He was listed at like 210. It was a joke, and then the team listed him at like 196, and we all had a panic attack, right? Because that was the thing about him, is you were like, oh man, he moves like that at that size, but he wasn't that size. He runs big for his size, though. For $196, he's he can hit pretty hard, and I could see him having a role. I could see him having Devy value still, but that story gets hard to tell if he doesn't do much this year, right? Unless he transfers out next year and goes ballistic in a different program, which could happen. Now the wide receiver room, I think, is just loaded with talent. And a lot of interesting guys and less obvious guys too here, although still probably owned in your non-startup C2C. Probably some value to be had in startups on the lower guys here. Xavier Worthy is. I've seen people post that you're an idiot if you don't have him at the wide receiver 2 in this class. I have Igbuka ahead of him, but I can argue him at 3. He has elite speed, probably gets drafted in the first round for that reason. Like elite speed and good production in a P5. Like that's, freshman breakout, right? So I don't, my model has him right up there. I think it likes Singer a little bit better, but he's up there, I think for both data and film guys. And, he's not even the most
just
exciting.
A little small.
A little bit small, right? But the NFL seems to care a lot less than they used to, particularly
especially when they're fast.
Especially when you
I think we were about to say the same thing.
yeah. Jinx. He runs like a 4.36 or something, right? Like apparently extraordinarily fast. So super interesting. And then you got John Tay Cook, who I was just talking about a moment ago, who is the shiny new toy. Austin Nace has been pumping him up all off season, and for good reason. I did watch my film late this year, but I do watch film on all these guys, and Cook is really, really good, man. I really enjoyed watching his film, and then to see him, break out in the spring game and get a ton of hype from the beats is, it's a complete package for me for a freshman that I'm going to take early. I want to like his film, and I want to see him succeed, and I want to see other analysts like him as well. I like, for me, for the freshman, I like Branch, and then I kind of like Ennis's film second best. But him and Cook are really close. I've been drafting Ennis later, but I think I'm also going to regret that later. I don't think anyone would be shocked if Ennis lines up the wide receiver 1 in this class either, but just the Carnell Tate height has bumped him down a little bit for a reason, like how do you get on the field if you're not even the wide receiver 5 at Ohio State? But in any instance, I like Cook. I've been paying up for him, and I feel pretty good about that. But then you also got A.D. Mitchell, who transferred in from Georgia, who was really good for Georgia, went for 426 and, an offense loaded with veterans, and that, obviously runs the ball heavily. Played really well in the spring game, scored a touchdown, I think, in the national championship or late in
Yes,
the playoffs.
Natty.
And he's an X receiver, man. Stack him up, go up and get it. Was a fairly high 4-star, but man, I love Mitchell. I think he's a guy that like I should probably be trying to trade for because he's probably a little more under the radar, but he's been done nothing but succeed so far in his career. In the
I
SEC.
really like Mitchell too.
Yeah.
I do think I'm not like completely sold on his attitude, and that sounds mean to say, but I have heard some stories about AD Mitchell,
Got like incidents.
dating back to like high school. But obviously, people grow. But
people grow up,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you don't like the red flags, but how much water can you put in that cup? So I mean, honestly, he's a guy that like if you're on the clock with your second round pick and a supplemental, and someone wants it, you can get A.D. Mitchell for that pick. I think all day. And I think
I'd rather have the pick.
Yeah,
but I think you could get him for cheaper.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, fair. Third round pick, right? Probably gets him done. You know what I mean? After the vets we like are gone, but like Cordell Russell or A.D. Mitchell. Yeah, Cordell Russell's upside is the freaking moon, but A.D. Mitchell's is too. And he's already done stuff. Like you've already screened out some of the risk, and I think that's always wise to do in Devy and Campus to Canton is try to like trade to the safer asset with the same upside. And they got Isaiah Nair there too, man. Nair was getting all the hype in the world last year for good reason. As a sophomore, he went for almost 900 yards, 12 touchdowns in a beat Wyoming offense, like a bad Wyoming offense that didn't throw the ball. The kid went off and then tore an ACL last year, right? So does he lose his place in the pecking order?
Yeah.
Probably, but again, like he's a guy that could get an opportunity this year, and he could be an NFL draft pick this year. I think he was on the trajectory to go to the NFL if he didn't get hurt last year. So I think there's a ton of guys here. And then the other guy I think worth talking about, they had two other high recruits. DeAndre Moore is the wide receiver 19 and 247. The CTC guys have him. It's like a tier 3 guy, but pretty high in tier 3. So he's a guy that you can get super late that has some upside. I don't know. Is there anyone else you want to rank there? Those are the only guys I've really been drafting.
Nobody comes to mind. No.
Yeah, there was one other high recruit.
Jordan Whittington. Is he still on that team?
He is, but like, I don't know. He like flashes for a game and he gets hurt. I mean, he's like the Kadarius Toney of CFF. Like, what?
Yeah.
I don't think you have to do anything with him at this point. I think if he starts to go off, you pick him up off waivers, right? But
yeah,
I don't think he's owned in most leagues. Like I would have him as a drop at this point, unless it's like really deep and it's a shallow pool. But and then of course, like probably my second favorite player from Texas is Jatavian Sanders, who is a beast, who you got at a freaking discount his freshman year because he maybe was going to be an edge rusher, and it took forever for people to catch up to him playing tight end. And he's the Devy tight end too. I mean, there's no one ahead of Bowers. There's no one other than Bowers that I would put ahead of him.
Yeah.
True or false? Yeah, right?
True.
All right. You got anything else in Texas? That is a lot. We're an hour in on 4 teams. 3 teams. 4 teams.
It doesn't feel like an hour, though.
Doesn't feel like an hour. It's always a good time with you, buddy. Let's knock out a couple more. What do we have? You had 14, right? So
do you like these rankings here?
It's aggressive with Jonathan Brooks, but
you
can justify it
Devy?
for Devy. Yeah.
I think he has a better NFL build than Bucky Irving.
True. Hasn't done anything except be efficient as a backup right now. So
yeah,
probably will go for 600 yards this year or 1,000 yards this year, but he could also go for 600 over 8 games and have lost his job to Baxter by the end. So yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
aggressive. CFF, yeah, CFF. I like where he is. I like where Ewers is. I'm fine
I
with
mean, we did
Ewers
the
where he
same
is.
thing for TJ Harden. Just the only difference is that Harden doesn't have Baxter breathing down his
Yeah,
neck, but
yeah. Well, he's got Carson Steele, but
mhm.
Steele might not be good. Yeah, no, I don't hate it. I think it's fine. I think we could, switch these guys around any which way. But yeah, like your wide receiver rankings, I think are fair. Um, yeah, I Worthy just a hair ahead of McMillan. Jonte Cook, I love. I'm probably taking Cook over Dunze, smart or not, but I think where you have him is very reasonable.
Yeah, I think that's a how long do you want to wait question. Just
Yeah. I mean, Dunze is a day two draft pick, I think.
yeah,
I think it's exceedingly likely.
and I
So
think Odunze could be a late first, if not mid first. I think Odunze's ceiling is pretty dang high.
yeah, I've seen him mocked in the first multiple times. I've seen Singer mocked in the first too, though.
Yeah, I think. Well, Singer's I think is like, oh, his stats pop off the page, and then I'm not
I
sure
rewatched his
everybody's looked
film.
into him as much as you.
I rewatched his film, and I liked more of it on the second watching than I did in the first watching. I did. There's some stuff he did that was decent, but yeah, I just the other thing I found looking into his data, uh, his yards per route run against man is like pretty bad. It was like 1.8, which is anything below 2 is kind of a red flag. Um, but I don't know. You can be okay in the
I mean,
NFL succeeding against zone
yeah,
and not man. You can't do the opposite, right? If you can't succeed against zone in the NFL, you're done, right? Like you look at some charts and you're like, if you got a substandard yards per route run against zone, you're toast. But the man
1.8's
thing,
not horrible.
what?
1.8's not
1.8? No,
horrible.
no, and he could improve it this year. You know what I mean? Could be very efficient this year. Maybe not crazy volume, but high efficiency. We'll see. We'll see what happens. So, all right, who else do you want to talk to?
Yeah. Scroll up. My computer decided to have an aneurysm at this exact second. Kansas. No, Iowa State. Iowa State. The other team I have that has a new offensive coordinator this year is Iowa State. Their new offensive coordinator is Nate Scheelhaas. Hossey? I don't know. Something like that. He was the Iowa State run game coordinator last year and now takes over the OC job and quarterback coach job in what Matt Campbell called an offensive staff reorganization. And they needed to do more than reorganize, in my opinion. They were, I think, 120th in the NCAA in offense last year. They were bad. And Scheelhaas has never called plays before, but it'll probably be all the same Matt Campbell concepts that we used to see at Iowa. Maybe there will be more rushing since he was the run game coordinator. I don't know. He wasn't a very good run game coordinator. The run game was pretty bad last year. So it'll be interesting. They're coming off one of the worst years of the Matt Campbell era, 4-8 last season, and they had 8 double-digit losses. And then out of those 4 wins, 2 of them were close wins against Northern Iowa and UNLV.
That's ugly. I didn't realize they were that bad. I knew they weren't good, but
yeah. But the bright spot for Iowa State is that 2022 team was very young, and pretty much everyone returns on offense. On offense, they lose their best player from last year, Biletnikoff finalist wide receiver Xavier Hutchinson is no longer on Iowa State, but the rest of the team, I believe, including the offensive line, is pretty much the same. I think they graduated their center, but they bring back everyone else on offense except for him and Xavier Hutchinson. Coming back at quarterback is Hunter Deckers. Deckers used to have some Devy hype back when he was, backing up Brock Purdy. I still kind of see it. The dude does have an arm. He's big and stocky. He's somewhat athletic. I think most of his issues have been mental, trying to read defenses and whatnot. And those are the things that are a little bit easier to improve than compared to your, God given athletic ability.
It's his third
Um,
year.
I think it's his second year as starter.
Yeah,
It's
it's his
I
third
think it's
year
his third
in
year in
CFF. Yeah.
college, maybe fourth. Um, but last season he threw for 3,000 yards, threw for 19 touchdowns, had a 66.1% completion percentage, which is more than good. Just threw 14 interceptions, killed drives with interceptions, couldn't finish off drives with touchdowns. That was the story of Iowa State last year. Um, and I mean, Deckers had 457 pass attempts last year. If this team, isn't getting killed every single game, I don't see how that happens again. But if it does happen again, I mean, he'll be CFF relevant. QB3, QB4 type guy.
Yeah. I mean, part of it was that they couldn't run the ball last year too. I know you're
Yeah,
going to talk about
they
that, but
could
like
not
that
run
was
the ball.
like they had nothing to do except throw it to X because just couldn't get the ball going. And it was I thought did they have a lot of injuries in the line last year? I feel like that's true.
Maybe. I'm not sure. They definitely didn't play well as a line. I believe they were in the hundreds. And the other thing that Deckers did was no, never mind. He didn't rush. For some reason, I thought he rushed. He did not rush well. He had 73 yards and 2 touchdowns. But yeah, he'll be throwing to this season not Xavier Hutchinson, which is a big loss, and somebody has to fill into those shoes because Hutchinson caught 107 balls last year. So somebody's got to catch some passes, especially if you're going to throw 450 of them. Hutchinson was that big boundary wide receiver, so maybe that production is going to go to whoever that is. Maybe what I think is going to happen is that Jalen Noel, the slot wide receiver, is going to step up even further. Last season, he was their second leading wide receiver. He had 61 receptions, 609 yards, and just 3 touchdowns. Obviously, that's a stat line where you add 20 receptions with 300 yards and a few more touchdowns, sprinkle them in, and that's a very good CFF option. And I think he's a guy with some Devy value. He's 5'10", 185, has legit speed, makes plays in the return game. I think he's a guy who will make an NFL roster. But he is it's worth noting that he is pretty much a slot-only guy. 81.4% of his snaps last season came in the slot. That likely will not change. But I do like Jalen Noel quite a bit. And then the other name to really watch at wide receiver, I think, this year is Jaden Higgins. Jaden Higgins transfers in from Eastern Kentucky and the FCS, where he had 58 receptions, 757 yards, and 10 touchdowns last season. He stands at 6'4", 210 pounds, built like Xavier Hutchinson, built like the boundary wide receiver that succeeded in this offense in the past. I think Jaden Higgins is a guy that nobody's talking about that will be relevant for CFF, and could be an even bigger deal, especially if Noel were to go pro next year. Then I think it's definitely wheels up for a guy like Jaden Higgins going into 2024. But those are really the only two wide receivers that I think are a big deal. So we'll move on to the running back room, where Jirel Brock and Cartevious Norton both return at running back. Brock is now going into his 5th-year senior season. He started the season last year with 353 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns in the first 4 games before he went down with an injury, and then kind of just, it was weird because he'd play, but he'd get 3 carries, and he just seemed to be, bogged down by injuries for most of the season after that breakout first 4 games. Eric and I were talking before the show. Those games weren't necessarily against the greatest talent. I mean, he played Iowa and Baylor. His performance against Iowa was pretty bad. Baylor was decent, but those other 2 games were against like Southeast Missouri State or something. Um, so Jarrell Brock, I think it will be the RB1 in this offense next year. I'm not sure how important that is, but I think he will be. And then Cartevious Norton last year was a true freshman, pretty much took over the job after Brock went down, but was very ineffective, very inefficient, averaged just 3.6 yards per carry last season. Wasn't efficient by any other metrics either. But this offensive line returns 4 starters, like I mentioned, so maybe this run game can go back to where it has historically been with guys like David Montgomery and Breece Hall. But obviously, we don't feel that Brock or Norton are that level of talents.
Yeah, I think there's still like a shot that Norton works out, but I think it's more like hope for me at this point, and I think what we've seen suggests not. So like I kind of want to have him higher, but like I'm like I don't know. Byron Cardwell or Cartavius Norton. I mean, Cardwell's at least had some efficiency, you know. I think you can tell stories that Norton just needs a better offense, but like if you needed a better offense to be an average running back, you're not an NFL player, right? Like, if you're an NFL player, you would have been at least average in a bad offense, in my opinion. So
but he could be. I do think he's a CFF player in the future. I think getting on the field in year 1 in the P5 probably means you're a CFF guy as a junior or a senior. But yeah, I don't think there's an NFL potential.
Yeah.
And then for Iowa State on the recruiting trail, they bring in 2 players that I think are worth talking about. The first of which is 4-star quarterback J.J. Cole. I think 247 on 3, the real industry guys were a lot higher on J.J. Cole than most of us in the Devy and C2C community. J.J. Cole's 6'7". The list of quarterbacks in the NFL who have been really good at over 6'6" is like 0 people. I think Brock Osweiler comes to mind, but that's about it.
I was going to say Brock.
I wouldn't call him good.
Yeah, no, he's a player.
Yeah,
he's a quarterback.
He is a quarterback, and he did make it to the NFL. But yeah, that height does tend to make your release a lot longer, which is usually an issue. That's definitely documented with J.J. Cole. The one thing about him, though, with that release is his velocity is insane. He has the highest velocity over expected in the class, and he has 12.16 miles per hour of velocity over the average high school senior, which leads all recruits in that mark. I think, and I should be clear, I believe that's over the average, like high school senior legit recruit.
Right.
So
I don't think I care about velocity though at all. You're just like, there's good enough, and that's all you care about, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. But I think the arm is more than good enough. I mean, and his pocket presence isn't anything special or anything like that. But J.J. Cole is a guy that I will be rooting for personally, although I probably won't be investing in just because I've met him a couple times and he's a nice dude.
Right. That's always a good thing to hear.
Yeah. His dad actually was a kicker at Iowa State and now runs Cole's Kicking, which ranks all high school kickers and all collegiate kickers for recruiting and the NFL draft. So that's a fun little tidbit too. And then 3-star wide receiver Benny Ngoye is also joining the Cyclones in Ames. And he was originally committed to Nebraska, decommitted, went to Iowa State. He's 6'4", 195, has athletic comps to Justin Hunter, A.T. Perry, George Pickens. I mean, this is a big, fast wide receiver who earned praise from the coaching staff in spring practices as an early enrollee. I think after it's Jaden Higgins' turn, it's probably Benny Ngoye's turn. So he's a player that I'm probably watching in the long run. Probably not drafting at all, but watch list Devy guy.
Do you care to rank Jaden Higgins for either side?
I think we should rank him for CFF, not
Okay.
necessarily super high.
But you agree with me that it's largely the Noel show this year.
Yeah,
Also, I'm very optimistic with Xavier Worthy. I think they spread the ball out this year, but I didn't really see that.
that's about where he was last year.
Oh, really? I thought he was like 800 yards and a handful of touchdowns. Is that where he
Yeah,
is?
he was a little low, but I think like Cephas might have finished above him. Luke McCaffrey definitely did finish
Davis has
above
been
him.
like an OUI this season, though. So, yeah, Luke McCaffrey.
They said today they're not suspending him.
Oh, they're not. Oh,
I
move that
believe.
up. Put him up that list. Yeah,
Um,
I'm fine with that.
Luke McCaffrey definitely finished above him, but Worthy I think finished right above Troy Franklin. I think Wiggles finished above him too. I think we might be low on these G5 guys, but yeah.
Okay. Any other issues? Just I mean, like for Noel, I put Noel. I mean, I'm penciling him in for like damn near 1,000, if not over 1,000. I just
Yeah,
you want to
I
put
like that.
Jaden Higgins on. I mean, it
Yeah,
could be.
I think Jaden Higgins is like down here right above Tez Johnson.
Yeah, there you go. Throw him in. We're probably low on Jeremiah Hunter too.
It's Cal.
Yeah, and Cal with a worse quarterback than the bad quarterback last year. So tough to be super enthusiastic about him, but I drafted him a little bit. He's going to get targets, lots and lots of targets. All right, cool. We done with Iowa State?
Yep.
I really want to like Cartavius Norton. I think it's a waste of time. So you want the next free solve, right? But you ain't going to find him at Iowa State this year. Okay. So my next school is Baylor. No offense if you're from Baylor. It's an awesome school. It just hasn't been awesome for fantasy football the past few years. I mean, obviously the highlight of the team for CFF is Richard Reese, true freshman that went for over 1,000 yards, 14 touchdowns. I mean, that is a lot of production. The problem with Reese is that he's like a $1.94. If they're listing him at $1.94, he's probably $1.88, right? Actually, they might even be listing him at lower than that. Very undersized, right? Slight build for a P5 running back, but extraordinarily productive. I've heard some concerns like, do they split the workload up this year? I mean, they split it up a little bit last year. Quaylon Jones had 500 yards. Someone else had 500 yards. Quaylon Jones had 462, and there was someone else that had 500. So, I mean, it's not that like Reese got 100% of the carries. It's that he was really good at the carries he got. They did transfer in Dominic Richardson, who had some CFF hype last year, purportedly going to be the guy at Oklahoma State, and then he was not the guy. He was a guy, and I think he is just a guy. So I'm not that worried about Dominic Richardson, and I'm not drafting him. Quaylon Jones is like stupidly athletic, has gotten better at playing the running back position, but I don't see him forcing more than timeshare. So if you want a guy there, it is Richard Reese. I'm not buying him as a Devy asset, but CFF Dynasty, yeah, interesting. You probably get 2 to 3 more years out of him being a highly productive guy. Even if he loses a little bit of work, he can still be, a top 36 type running back. So I'm stoked if I own him, grabbing him if he's available in supplementals after, my elite guys. There's a couple other names that are interesting there. I mean, quarterback, I don't know if we have to talk about it. Blake Shapen was there last year. He was adequate. 18 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, ran a little bit, was decently accurate. Sawyer Robertson is in quarterback competition with him. Robertson is athletic. I think you kind of, for CFF, want Robertson to get the job because he can run. But all signs point to being Shapen. And Shapen supported some wide receivers to some level last year. Monterey Baldwin caught my eye in the scorecards early in the season. he is a little dude. He is 5'9", 164. I mean, you're talking little dude, but blindingly fast. And as a true sophomore last year, went for 565 before, game breaking kind of ability. And then I also think it's interesting that 4-star Keytron Jackson transferred over from Arkansas. I mean, he had a little bit of hype behind him as a recruit, traditional X size, athletic, and has gotten some hype in the spring game and in spring practices. Was apparently the wide receiver one in spring practices, as reported by some beats, although other beats listed him as a guy that caught passes. So I guess depends who you talk to, but I will say if I'm drafting a wide receiver there that's not Monterey Baldwin, it would be Keytron Jackson. Do I feel like you have to draft him? No, no one is drafting this dude, but he's definitely a guy to watch list. I mean, Baylor has had high volume wide receivers in the past. It's just been a couple of years. I think Denzel Mims, probably the last guy that was a star there. Oh, I mean, I guess they had Tyquan Thornton, wasn't really a great CFF asset, but was a second round NFL draft pick. And he's basically a tall Monterey Baldwin. I think like what he is, right? So anyways, there's some interest for me there, but those are guys I'm just like kind of paying attention to. If one of them goes off in week 1, week 2, I'm probably putting them in my waiver run. I don't know if there's anyone you got to fight to death over there. And then interestingly, this was a nugget I pulled out of my research that I didn't know earlier, but tight end Jake Roberts, who transferred in this year, is apparently getting a lot of hype as one of the better pass catchers on the team. He led the team in the spring game with 5 catches for 60 yards. So maybe a guy there for CFF purposes, if nothing else. How we doing on the ranks? Reese high, but yeah, I like it for CFF. Yeah. I think there's some fear he loses some work, but I mean, that's like if he just did what he did last year, that's like where he winds up in the rankings, right? So
yeah,
that's for CFF. So that's cool. I'm with you. I like that you threw Keytron. You threw Keytron on down low, right? Oh, you threw Baldwin in down low.
I threw him. Keytron's a little lower, but yeah.
Oh, you just didn't. Oh, for CFF, you threw them both in there.
Yeah.
Got it.
And
Keytron could be a Devy guy if he like goes off this year, but that's what you would be able to do. I'm not really Devy watch listing him at this point, but yeah, yep, that don't make sense. I think Quaylon's a guy that like if Brees goes down could be good. He was I think pretty new at playing the position when he started 2 years ago, and has consistently gotten work and gotten better. But yeah, you need Brees to get hurt to care about him. So I'm cool with all these guys. And Jake Roberts could be a guy that, like, if he's the dude there, could be, a top 20 CFF tight end or even higher. But, whatever. It's the first mention I've seen of him. So I'll be conservative in ranking. I think you were. And I think this is all good. I don't think you need to put Blake Shapen on any kind of Devy list, but hey, you ain't hurting anyone with him being as the 20th ranked Devy quarterback. So go for it, young man.
All right. Well, we'll move on to Kansas. I mean, I'm good to keep going all night.
I'm with you. The kids in bed, the girls in bed. I don't care.
Kansas. Kansas is like the exact same Kansas we saw last year. They returned 95% of their offense. I believe they just graduated one offensive lineman, and that was pretty much it. They don't bring in any like huge transfers. So if you already know Kansas football, you can just go ahead and skip this section because it'll be the exact same as it was last year. But if you don't, the quarterback position is pretty much locked in to be Jalon Daniels. Jalon Daniels had a pretty good season last year and is considered by a lot of people to be, the best quarterback in the Big 12, at least for college football, not for Devy, just to be clear. He did. He was selected to a number of preseason All Big 12 teams this year. I think one group had him as the preseason Offensive Player of the Year. He is a true dual threat quarterback. In 9 games started last season, he threw for 2,000 passing yards and 18 touchdowns with just 4 interceptions, and then added 425 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns. Last season in CFF, he finished as the QB8 in points per game among quarterbacks who are playing again this year. The other star of the offense is going to be junior running back Devin Neal. Devin Neal has NFL size at 5'11", 210. He has some legit ability in the receiving game. Last season, he had 180 attempts for 1,090 yards and 9 touchdowns, along with 21 receptions, 183 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. I mean, that's exactly what you want to see from a true sophomore. Breaking 20 receptions as a true sophomore means you can, do both things at the NFL level usually, at least for these guys that we consider to be Devy relevant. He was the RB 31 in points per game among players who are once again returning this season. But I think I'd have him ranked higher for Devy than I would for CFF. He's a guy who's done it now for 2 seasons as a true freshman and a true sophomore. His true freshman season, he had 707 rushing yards and 8 rushing touchdowns. And then Kai Thomas transfers out, heads to Kent State. So the RB2 is likely to be redshirt junior Daniel Highshaw Jr., who was the RB2 to start the season last year before he got injured after 5 games. In those 5 games, he had 44 rushing attempts, 262 rushing yards, and 5 rushing touchdowns. The one thing to note is that Devin Neal averaged just 11.25 carries per game in his first 5 games with Highshaw healthy, and then averaged 18.7 without Highshaw. So it definitely was more of a committee back when he was healthy. I don't know if that'll happen again this year or not, but what do you think about that?
I have very little opinion on it. Didn't watch a lot of Kansas. I mean, Devin Neal is by far and above the most talented guy there, but some coaches just like to force committee. So that actually makes me feel tepid on him for CFF. How about you?
Yeah,
I was going to put
same.
him like ahead of Richard Reese, which just the production from last year repeated justifies that, right? But if they're going to give him 12 carries a game, he should be like below Lloyd, below Bucky Irving for CFF. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think Highshaw is necessarily a bad college running back. I definitely don't see him as a Devy value, but I think he's, I don't know, P5 level college player.
I wanted to put Neal a little bit lower, but why would I put Neal behind Austin Gianti or Jaden Ott, right? Like Gianti is a G5 player, Jaden Ott's a little guy, Devin Neal is a prototypical NFL running back.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. He's
got to be right there. I mean, you can put him ahead of Lloyd. I think I'm higher on Lloyd than most people, but Devin Lloyd should go ahead of him, right? I mean, Devin Neal, I mean, should go ahead of Lloyd. What do you think?
I think that one's close.
I mean, Neal has done more than Lloyd.
Yeah, but I think Lloyd's more exciting.
Me too. I just think he's a brute. Like the highlights from Lloyd are like beast mode, right? Or like that's the way he runs. Just a bruising dude, can catch passes. So I will leave that alone. Do you need to rank Highshaw?
I think you put him at the bottom for CFF, near the bottom, but.
And do you care about Dylan McDuffie? I personally do not.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that. I mean, Dylan McDuffie transfers in. Obviously, he played for Leipold at Buffalo, but never started for Leipold. Went to Georgia Tech last year and did fuck all. Excuse my French. So, no, I don't care.
I had another thought. I thought, Jalon Daniels. So I think I'm much higher on Jalon Daniels.
I actually do. I do have Devin Neal above Marshawn Lloyd by quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, I was gonna say I like vibes. I like Lloyd better. It's irrational thought. So I like Jalon Daniels for an NFL draft prospect more than a lot of people do. I like him more than Bo Nix. Do you like him more than Bo Nix?
No,
I do, but I will leave him where he is.
I
I put him
I
where I think.
I like him where you have him. I
Yeah,
think him and Ward might be give and take for me, but I like him where you have him.
I just think he could be a first round draft pick if he plays really well with this team. He's a little small, but he's good. He elevated that offense last year. They were a trash bag team before he took over. They were not good. I
Yeah,
love I
I don't know.
love that. I love a guy coming in and just dragging an offense up. Like you can tell, like that's a to me that's a sign of talent that you elevated the players around you. Uh, I don't know. We shall see what happens. Right. I think if he
Yeah,
goes off, then I'm gonna be trading for him, uh, assuming he's gonna be an NFL guy. But
I don't know.
all
I
right.
think I'd rather trade for him now. I mean, I think he's CFF relevant
Mm-hmm.
in a good way, and I think he could beat Penix or even Frank Harris for CFF. But I don't see him getting drafted round one.
Yeah, definitely very, very CFF relevant. Yeah, I mean, it's tough to put a guy over Frank Harris. Phoenix, I could argue just because of the rushing ability with Jalon Daniels, but I feel a
I mean,
little.
Nick's is a rusher in himself.
Yeah, I like Jalon Daniels better as a rusher. I feel like Phoenix is like at this point in his career is just like a mobile
Oh,
quarterback, but
Penix.
not a Penix. Yeah.
I
Oh, Bo
I,
Nix.
I
Oh,
just
Bo
heard
Nix is a
Nick's.
way better
Yeah,
rusher. Oh
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Bo Nix is a great rushing quarterback. Yeah, he's good. Do you care about Mason Fairchild?
Yes.
I don't care about
The
these wide
receiving
receivers.
options at Kansas are grim, literally. Their number one wide receiver is Luke Grimm. He
Oh,
had
that's who.
12.36 C2C or CFF points per game last year. Lawrence Arnold had 10.89. Quentin Skinner had 7.7. Um, that'll probably be about the same. Grimm might get up to like 14, in which case, he's a bench guy for CFF.
Yeah,
But
I'm good with Grimm.
but I think Kansas tight end Mason Fairchild is definitely a CFF relevant guy. He's definitely a guy that I want on my C2C/CFF teams as my tight end too. He's just safe. Last year he had 35 receptions, 443 yards, and 6 touchdowns, which is good for 10 fantasy points per game and a tight end 7 finish. I think he'll be similarly involved like that again this season. And he's 6'4", 260, so he has good size, but I don't think he has the athleticism to be a true NFL tight end. I don't really see him as anything more than a fifth, sixth round guy at best, but most likely a UDFA. Um, but for CFF, I do like Mason Fairchild as a top 10 option at the position.
You know, these guys get drafted. They do every year. Dalvin Smith or Mason Fairchild.
Um, Dalvin, just because he's going
RJ
to be playing
Maryland.
wide receiver. I think,
I, de- I definitely have him above Terrence Ferguson and anyone else
yeah,
below.
I think Maryland would be like sexier, but I think Fairchild might end up higher at the end of the
I think it's
season just because
smarter to.
it's
I think it's silly to rank Fairchild, Maryland ahead of him. I think it's Fairchild there for me. That's why I have these guys. I don't care about any of these wide receivers at all.
that's fair.
Jaden
And then
Ham.
on the recruiting trail, Kansas not doing much of note, but Jaden Ham is a 3-star freshman tight end who was an early enrollee, gained some praise. I don't necessarily think he's even a Devy guy to watch, but he's a long-term CFF guy just to watch list, I think.
Yeah. So, all right, cool. 3 teams of yours. I got BYU, Texas, Baylor down. I guess let's do Oklahoma State. And then
Yeah, let's keep
maybe,
going.
yeah.
Let's get
The
all
rest of mine are like
14.
all awful, all bad.
All 14. I have one team left, I think.
Yeah.
No, I don't. That's a lie.
Yeah. Most of mine we barely need to talk about, but we will because that's what we do here. Uh, so Oklahoma State is going to be just there's not a lot to get excited about this year. I mean, they lost Spencer Sanders, who has been a steady presence at the helm of that team for several years. Generally, a good CFF quarterback, and I think he's a good college quarterback. Maybe like last round type NFL guy. I mean, some of the guys that got drafted this year. I think aren't as good as Spencer Sanders. But it was an unusual class. You could tell everyone was chasing for Brock Purdy, right? For sure. So Sanders is replaced by probably Alan Bowman, but he hasn't been very good. Like okay in terms of accuracy over his 5 years in college. I think he did a couple at Michigan and a couple somewhere else where he actually started. He didn't start at Michigan. It was like Louisville or something. And yeah, so I think the only guy you really want at quarterback is there's a true freshman named Zane Flores, who was the Gatorade Player of the Year in Nebraska, who threw for 9,000 yards in high school, which is a lot of yards for a high school guy to throw for. He's interesting, but not this year. Doesn't need to get ranked for CFF. Probably for CFF Dynasty. Like I kind of want this guy, but you don't have to draft him. You can get him next year. The only player I really want on this team is Ollie Gordon, who I am higher on than most people because he is a workhorse, build, dual threat running back. Wasn't blindingly efficient last year, but still ran for about 5 yards a clip in a generally bad Oklahoma State offense. Pushed the aforementioned Dominic Richardson out of the picture and really, seized the RB1 role as a true freshman. I mean, give me that. And then I look at this team and they're going to run the ball just 30 times a game, like every single game. And Gordon is going to get, 18 to 20 of those carries. They got a couple other guys, but I do think Gordon's the guy. And again, like Gordon's high school tape is filled with him like going up and snatching balls out of the air. Like he has actual receiving ability, not just like dump off screen. I'm not saying he's a route runner, but like can catch the ball, track it downfield, succeed on wheel routes, which is like that's all you're looking for a running back that's not Bijan Robinson. You want him to be able to run a wheel. You want him to be able to like, get some yardage on a screen or a route in the flats. I do have another guy that's getting some spring game hype that I expect to get some work. That is Jaden Nixon, who is a little dude, but electric, is the word used to describe guys like him. Last year, running behind Gordon and Richardson, he had 755 all-purpose yards. A lot of that came as a returner, but like that's the mold, right? He's your dagger. He's your do-it-all, jack of all trades guy. But you can see him having an effective role this year as well. I don't know, you got to rank him for CFF. You can for sure. I think they're going to run the ball enough that their RB2 might outperform some other teams' RB1. But a name to keep in mind. He was specifically hyped up by the coach. Wide receiver, they've got like some names that have had a little bit of success in CFF. Dejon Stribling is a post-hype guy. He got pumped up a little bit at Washington State, like last year, the year before.
But he didn't do it.
He was their best receiver last year, but their best receiver was only good for 540 yards. Is that the offense? Is that him? You'd like to think, if you're a superstar, you're going to seize the target share. You're going to force production. So is he a superstar? No, but like, I don't know. Maybe he gets 30% target share and is successful because there's not a lot else going on there. I mean, Brennan Presley is a slot receiver in the Big 12. He's their top returning guy. He was good. He had some good games last year. It's a little guy, kind of like that prototypical CFF slot, like small, speedy guy. And then Arlen Bruce, the fourth, you got to put the 4 there, was pretty good at Iowa last year. Had over 20% of their wide receiver targets in a bad offense. So, you're not impressed with his raw production, but he seems to be a pretty good wide receiver. He was sought after in the portal by some schools. So he's a guy that could be a guy there. But, like, the reality is that since who was the good kid, like 3 or 4 years ago from Oklahoma State? Guy that's from Baltimore.
Rager? No, he's
not, dude. Rager's TCU. Whatever. They had a superstar CFF wide receiver for like multiple years. That was a boundary guy. That was, a 6th-round NFL draft pick. Since then, there has not been a wide receiver worth rostering for CFF or Devy on Oklahoma State. I got one other name to mention at CFF because this was a Austin Nace special. It was Tyke Andrews. He threw him out there in our wide receiver show as a super late round dart throw. Tyke Andrews was productive in high school, very productive, like 1,200 yards, a dozen touchdowns, and is an extraordinary athlete, like freak list type guy. So if some guy's going to do something there in a Devy world, it's Tyke Andrews, but it's a big if coming out of Oklahoma State.
Tylan Wallace.
Tylan Wallace, right, was awesome for CFF. I don't know if you were playing then, but he was a 1,200-yard guy one year, and then the year after that he regressed a little bit, but was a early round CFF pick in his heyday. So that's what I got in Oklahoma State. You got anything in Oklahoma State?
No, you can check out those rankings. I think I might be a little high on Gordon, but I'm not sure.
I think that most people would laugh at you, but I love freshmen that catch passes and have workhorse size. So I'm with it. I think we're low on Damian Martinez because you don't like him. I like Damian Martinez, but I'm cool with Ollie Gordon there. I'll take the wins I can get here.
And then
for
scroll down a little. Brennan Presley is there. For CFF, go ahead.
I was going to say I think you're a little high on Gordon.
Think so?
It could happen, so, but you're going to tell a story to put him ahead of Devin Neal. I mean, you know what I mean? You're going to put him ahead of a guy that's got a 1,200 combined yard season already. I think that's aggressive. I would put him.
I was just thinking he was a little better last year than he was.
Yeah, he wasn't. I mean, he was good, but it was good for a freshman in a bad offense. But I don't think he's a superstar by any means. He didn't pop in my efficiency metrics, so I think he's like a CFF guy. But nonetheless, I think has a potential future. All right. Are you doing one more school or are we done? We're an hour and 45 minutes. How many? We get left 7 for next time if we quit now?
I'm good to go. It's up to you. We could even just
Houston.
We could end it and then restart it if you want, or whatever.
I'm a fiend for it, Kyle said. I don't care. Yeah, we got 4 schools left.
I think you got 4. Yeah, I think we got 6 schools left.
I got 3. You have Oklahoma.
Oh, I guess I do have 4. Yeah. No, I have 3.
The math skills are fleeing you. Yeah, you got 3. All right, let's call it because that'll be an hour show next time.
Okay.
And then, unless you want to just pound through it. I don't want to pound through it. I got to work in the morning. Being the responsible adult that I am.
I got to work in the morning too. It's only 9 o'clock.
I'm an old man, dude. Come on. All right. Yeah, what are we going to do? Like 4 schools next time? We'll blow through it. And it'll be
6.
A short show. 6. All right. You want to do one more school?
We can get Oklahoma out of the way. It's a big one.
I don't know. Let's start with Oklahoma next time. You're crazy.
Okay,
You're crazy.
we can do Houston right now.
48 minutes of this. Houston's also important. I think you got some headliners.
No, I think Houston's not going to be as good anymore.
You get the high. Oh, they lost a coordinator.
No, I mean they lose Clayton Tune, they lose Tank Dell, and they just move up.
Moved up. I think it's some talent.
Tougher competition.
It's Sam Brown. They got Matthew Golden, so I think they'll be okay.
Yeah.
All right. We will debate that next time on the Devy Joes. Featuring Kyle. But if you guys made it this far with us, we appreciate you. Make sure you're liking the video. Make sure you're subscribing to the channel. Make sure you're following me and following Kyle. We appreciate your support. We continue to build out the big board. If you want a copy of the big board, just DM me. We'll send you the link to it. Go nuts. If you think our rankings are great or crazy, let us know. We want to hear from you. hop up on the Twitter streets and we can go toe to toe on some of the rankings. But with that, I'm Eric. I'm EK. I'm signing out. For me, for Kyle, I hope you guys all have a phenomenal night, and we hope to see you next time.